Hi everyone, welcome back to Whiskers, the podcast that takes you inside Northwestern women's soccer, beyond the scoreboard and into the stories, people, and process behind our program. I'm Ava Goodin, a player here at Northwestern, alongside assistant coach Rich Manning. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on one of the biggest questions recruits and families have, the college soccer recruiting process. What coaches are actually looking for, what players should focus on, and how to find the right fit. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Okay, Ava, we are here. You guys know Ava Goodin as the hostess with the mostest of the podcast, but she also was a top recruit coming out of Memphis, Tennessee. Down south, playing in Memphis and Florida and Texas and all over the place. And we're going to ask her a little bit about her process. So, Miss Ava, how did you end up at Northwestern?
Yeah, I mean, speaking of down south, I thought I would stay down south as well in college. When I was initially going through my process of even figuring where I wanted to look at for schools, if I'm being totally blunt, anything above Tennessee was not really on my list. And I don't even think that's because I was close-minded entirely. Northwestern was a school I just didn't know much about and in general. I remember my dad actually was the first one to push me to reach out to here when my club coach helped me a lot in my process at the time, Casey White. Shout out
Casey.
Yes, she got hooked up with Rich and then connected me from there. But my dad was like, yeah, you should check out this school called Northwestern. And I was like, Northwestern, there's one in Mississippi. And I don't know if that's my vibe because there's also just a lot of schools with the cardinal directions in the name. And I would get them confused. I still have some people back home who think I go to Northwestern, Mississippi, which is fine. But that wasn't what I was wanting to look at the time. But my dad was like, might as well, worst case, if you get interest and don't like the school, then that's just something you can check off the list and be happy that you at least made the attempt and figured out. Even if you don't find something you like, that at least helps you find out what you don't like, which I think is equally as important in the recruiting process. So from there, I was like, oh, okay, Dad, fine. If you're going to be on my butt about it, I'll just do it so you stop nagging me, whatever. So then asked Casey to reach out for me and then talk to Rich. And then from there, it went pretty quickly. I think within really a matter of weeks from when I first talked to you, went on my visit here shortly after. And I think it was on my flight home from visiting the campus. That's what really sealed the deal for me. Told my parents, was like, yeah, this is where I want to go. And just really had a feeling of contentment and that gut reaction of this felt like home to me. But I still waited a few days to really let it sink in and to make sure that feeling stayed. And it did. Ended up committing. And even now, about 3 years later, I still have that feeling and just that feeling of yeah, this is home and it feels right. So the fact that it's also lasted through my 2 years here, 3 since I committed, I think says a lot about the work I put into the process and taking the time to make sure I found a feeling that stayed consistent,
Okay, so you know me, I have a lot of questions.
Yes. Right.
Okay, so you probably started talking to us junior year, August, September.
Yeah.
Which is fairly late for Division I. And you made some excellent videos, Tecker videos, game footage, practice, a lot of stuff, which was great. Yes. That helped us quite a bit. So, and you committed in November?
Yes. I think the end-ish of November. Okay. Yeah.
So when did you start reaching out to colleges?
I want to say I really started to consistently reach out early on that same year around January. If I committed in November, about 8 or 9 months prior was when I tried to consistently every week, maybe closer to every 2 weeks at the minimum, reaching out to schools that I was interested in with what you just said. Making tape was a big thing I did that I feel made a big difference in my process. And that was also an easy reaching out point where if I didn't have anything particularly to say at a time besides
Here's my new video.
Here's my video. Right.
Awesome. So
Yeah.
January of your sophomore year.
Yes. So sophomore year, then going into my junior year.
And did you write a lot of different schools, or did you have a few picked out?
Yeah, I would also say this generally for any player. My opinion is that it's better to cast a wide net early on, which is what I did. And then from there,
So we're talking dozens?
yeah, I think early on, like before that January, like before I even consistently like reached out to schools, I had already like made a list of every single school I was interested in and found all their emails of the coaches that I wanted to email and put it all in this big Word doc to make the process for myself as easy as possible. Also thanks to my dad. That was his suggestion, so I can't take all credit for the idea. But that helped me a lot. And I think on that list initially it was me close to like 50 schools. Like it was pretty big. But also at the time, like still, I think this was earlier in my sophomore year, I didn't really know what I wanted yet. I mean, I had a pretty vague idea, but in my head, I was like, okay, I want to start off with this wide cast of schools. Then as I figure out, like, not just like if the school wants me, but also like if I want them, like if the school's the right fit for me, I can do process of elimination and narrow it down. But I definitely did not want to feel like I started with too narrow of a pool and then kind of screw myself over from that perspective, from trying to go narrow to wide, start out wider, and then as the process goes on, it should naturally shrink.
So 50 emails every couple weeks.
Yeah, it was. I put in some
When did you do that? In the evening, at night,
I think in the evening.
during your math class that you didn't like?
No, I pay attention in class.
Okay,
Rich,
good.
Let me tell you, I remember I would be up late. This would be after I did my homework, after practice, and would be sitting at my computer, sending off
Popping off emails.
those emails.
Making sure that
Yes.
they weren't cut and paste.
Actually, it was pretty stressful. Yeah, because I
don't want to mess
no,
up.
did not cut and paste, but I would get really stressed because my eyes would get tired and I'd be worried I would have like a typo in there. There were like one or two schools where I think I accidentally did like emailed the wrong school because their names were like very similar. And I got an email being like,
It happens.
this ain't us. And I was like, crap.
It happens. We get it. It's not fatal, at least to me.
Yeah.
At least to us.
Yeah. But those were few and far between and probably could be solved if I didn't push it off till later.
So this started January of sophomore year.
Yes.
Before that, had you done any ID clinics?
I did my first one in like 7th grade, but not for recruiting purposes. It was more, I did one at Vanderbilt because it's like 3 hours from my house and I had like a couple teammates also go. And that was more just, it was like a camp experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I still think even then it was just a good perspective to get even that young, just to like have any sort of practice in that ID clinic environment, because it can be intimidating, especially if it's new and it's like your first clinic and whatnot. But I think I did do a pretty decent amount of them.
How many your sophomore year?
Rare.
Ish.
Maybe like 5 or 6 at least.
Okay, and junior year? Or by then you were doing visits?
By then it was visits. So it was really just my sophomore year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the ones you went to, was it just kind of like, oh, maybe a coach had reached out or talked to my club coach about asking about me? Or was it part of your list, like, oh, this is one of my 50 schools. So I definitely want to check this out if I can.
Yeah, for me, in an ideal scenario, my coach or someone would have just reached out for me beforehand, or I would just have some sort of connection to that program or that coach prior to going to the camp, just to ensure that I'm getting looked at all. Because I think it varies, I think, from school to school, but some ID camps can run like rather large in numbers, and if the coach has no idea who you are beforehand, not that you have no chance of getting seen, but I think the likelihood that you get like an accurate evaluation increases by a lot if they just at the very least know your name going into the camp, especially for ones that have more campers, which you don't really know at times until you're actually there. I also did ones that had 30 players or 20 and were much smaller. Even then though, I almost always try to ensure that I had reached out in some way prior to going, just to maximize my experience there.
Awesome. Let's see. Would you say, looking back, your recruiting process was enjoyable?
I think, yes, it was enjoyable, but I think the recruiting process is definitely multifaceted and the emotions you experience and just journey in general. And joy was one of the many emotions I experienced in the process. I also think I could have made more of an effort to be present in the process and enjoy it more. I think it's very easy to fixate on the outcome of recruiting, especially in recruiting where it is very outcome based, where your goal is to commit to a school. And until you're there, it can be hard to live in the moment and like find joy like in the small wins. Like whether feedback is good or bad, it's very easy to fixate on those moment to moment things. And then because once you commit, don't get me wrong, it's a great feeling, but then you're turning right around and thinking, okay, how can I get ready over the next year and a half to make the best impact I can at my school? Just like anything, where once you get to the top of the mountain, there's always more to climb. And also, I think very like reflective of life, like everything is a process and outcomes and wins can be few and far between, and they feel great. But if you're only focused on those things, you're going to miss out a lot on the enjoyment in the process. So I
What would you
think,
say would
yeah.
be your top 2 or 3 highlights?
Yeah, for highlights, just visits in general were super fun. Like those are probably my favorite part of the recruiting process was actually getting to travel and go to see each school. Obviously, like for me, like to see the school in person and traveling like all these different places and play like the game of comparison, but also that was something I got to experience like with my parents. And I think that was really special because they put in so much work to help me get to where I was and were just very supportive for me like through my whole soccer journey. And yes, recruiting and seeing schools, I think it's definitely an individual and personal process, but I enjoy getting to share that personal experience with my parents, especially with the work that they'd helped me do to get there. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to ask you to give your top points, the hot points, the hot tips for Ava on helping someone find the right college soccer program.
Yeah. So for my future book, Recruiting for Dummies, could workshop the name. We'll see. Maybe you can write the foreword for me, Rich. I don't know.
I'd love to be
Yeah,
honored.
right?
I'd be honored.
For my first chapter, I would name it The Self Scout because as with most things, I think reflection re- reflecting should be the first step in the process.
Reflecting on your game or how you're communicating.
I think for me, when it comes to recruiting, it's reflecting on what I want out of the process and already having an idea versus going in like totally blind and not having any direction. Like, for example, something that I felt helped me a lot is I made a list of tangibles for like what I wanted out of a school. And this was consistent with any school I would go to see or I would talk to. I would have like a list of like 3 or 4 things like team culture, playing style. Those were like 2 that were really important to me. And those were 2 things I made sure to evaluate and pay like especially close attention to whenever I talked or saw a school. Because I knew if a school like met those things, then from there I could explore it further and see what other like advantages or even like disadvantages it has. Because I think being able to separate the intangibles and what this school like needs for me to go there and have a successful 4 years versus what are like preferences. Like for me, like a preference is like how good are the quality of food at the dining halls. Like if it's not great, but I love like everything else, like a school can like get away with that for me. But like I said, like something like team culture, that I think of a school for me, like if the team culture wasn't the right fit for me, then I think everything else doesn't matter as much. Yes. So I think being able to separate and identify for you early on what the intangibles are versus like what are like great add-ons or preferences.
What you want, what you have to have,
Yes.
what are the non-negotiables, one of the nice things, the icing on the cake.
Yes.
Okay, so chapter 1, self-scout.
Yes.
Chapter 2.
Chapter 2 is called People Over Programs. And this is the outreach part of your process. So for me, like in terms of just chronologically where this fell, this was probably like that January and onward part of my sophomore year when I started to seriously like and consistently reach out to schools, and not just schools, because yes, it's great to get that rapport going with schools and get like your name out there and try to learn more about them directly, but also like using resources like your club coaches, former teammates, even just like normal students at these schools, which I think is especially important just to get a perspective from someone who's not involved as an athlete, just like what their experience is like at the school. Similar to like casting a wide net of coaches, trying to cast a wide net with your network and getting as many different perspectives on these schools as you possibly can. Because yes, you're an athlete, but you're also a student and you're much more than that. And trying to figure out like how you fit at a school in terms of like all these different facets of who you are, I think is really important. And gaining as many perspectives as you can helps a lot. And
Okay, we're
2.
using people in chapter 2. People
Yes.
over programs. Chapter 3.
Yes. Chapter 3 is the reality check. So this for me was around June 15th. I think I could even include like that initial period of calling schools on that date when I could have contact. And this is my second phase of reflecting, and then again, kind of refining on what you had reflected on at the start of your process. Because at this point, too, like I remember in my process, I discovered things that I didn't even know that like mattered to me as I like went into and explored more programs. So like looking at your list of intangibles and checking like, do I still like feel strongly about all of these? And the schools I'm talking to, do they meet all these criteria? And then also in terms of reflecting, another type of list that helped me was making a pros and cons list for each school on top of maybe the intangibles I had to get them on my radar in the first place, which I think the pros and cons help a lot, because I think it's like comparing if a school has maybe like 2 really big pros and maybe like a couple cons versus a school that has a lot of small, consistent pros, maybe not that any that stand out as much, but they're very like consistent across the board. And I think this helped too, because I think recruiting at times can be a sort of emotional progress. And I think emotion and being guided by your gut is definitely important at times. But I think it's also too good to get like more of an objective perspective, which I think like literally like writing out the pros and cons of the school can help take some of the emotion out of it and maybe even help you gain a different perspective that, your high school feelings can get in the way of.
Great.
Yeah.
Chapter 4.
Chapter 4 is called Your Digital Highlight Reel. And this is where social media comes into play, which this will be from my experience, but I think it's even evolved a lot since when I was in my process. And honestly, I think social media can be helpful, but I don't think it should be a primary focus in your recruiting process. I see now like a lot of players, like X, formerly Twitter, seems to be like a pretty big platform for players to like post schedules, post accomplishments, and like kind of showcase who they are as both a player and person. Instagram, I think, is kind of used. I feel like Instagram's almost more like a highlight reelsy type of app, which I think if you build a rapport with schools and can follow like coaches on there, maybe they'll follow you back and kind of see your profile, which I think linking that to emails can be helpful in terms of like just letting a coach maybe see who you are. But I think like emails should be that priority in my opinion, and making film, and maybe social media is more of like an outlet for those things. Like, and that's like, if you have the time, as more of an add-on. It also could be a good resource to like look at like a more personal view of these college coaches too. Like just in terms of like, not just how can I get seen on there, but what can I see as a player.
So you're checking out my Instagram.
Yeah, Rich, I could be stalking you.
How would you rate my Instagram?
I mean, I'm trying to think. I like your walking zones personally. I remember those were still going. Those were going on strong when I was checking it out.
Okay, so I got a thumbs up on that.
You did, because that was a more personal view of the program. which I found really helpful and I think can be hard to find, like when you're just looking at these schools' websites and you're getting like a very clean, professional look of the coaches, which is definitely important. But I think
what it's really like.
yes, social media can help see more of the person behind the title.
So be good with your social media, but also check out the colleges and coaches and maybe members of the teams, the college teams.
Yes.
Okay, is there a chapter 5?
There's a final chapter called
Final.
Yes, final
Big
chapter.
Crescendo.
At least right now, it's called From Clinic to Commitment. And we have briefly mentioned ID camps, but this is the chapter that's really going to expand on those because I think they can be a really useful tool when used in the right way. I kind of suggested this earlier on, but I do think, at least from my player perspective and going to different camps in my process, that they seem pretty subjective and different from school to school in terms of like how much a school like values their ID camps as a way to genuinely like scout players that they might want at their program. And already mentioned, I think having a connection to the school prior is very helpful and helps ensure, maybe even if a school doesn't traditionally like directly recruit from their ID camps, if they at least like know your name, that might give them more incentive. From what I know here at Northwestern, feel like we do take our ID camps pretty seriously in terms of really like looking at the players who are showing interest and maybe seeing how they could potentially fit into our program, like based on their performance at these ID camps. From my experience, like going to other schools and trying ID camps there, I went to one or two that I personally thought were a bit of duds in terms of I didn't feel like I was getting a genuine look from those schools, which isn't...
So, college coaches, don't be a dud with your ID clinic.
Preferably no. But I think, like I said, it can be hard to know till you're at those camps. And it's not like a way to talk poorly about those coaches. Like, I understand how there might not be as much value placed on those camps, which I think is why it's especially important to put work in on the front end as a player and focus on what you can control to give yourself the best chance to be put in the spotlight to be seen.
Okay, so Ava will be putting out on her Instagram the worst ID clinics she attended. Are we naming names? You don't have to.
I don't.
I'm joking.
Yeah, I've already been censored once or twice on here. Not explicit language, but I might, play it safe for right now.
That's fair.
So.
Okay, so Ava's book, Chapter 1, Self-Scout, What Do You Want? Chapter 2, People Over Programs. Both checking out the people of the colleges, but also using the people around you to help. Chapter 3, Reality Check, which is kind of a reflection, among other things. Chapter 4, Your Digital Highlight Reel, using video and social media. And Chapter 5, From Clinic to Commitment, using ID clinics to help.
Yes, I do have one more tip I meant to include for the ID clinics, is that we have discussed this a little bit, but something I focused on a lot was, rather than get really nervous about messing up in front of coaches, using mistakes as an opportunity to show them how I respond when things aren't always going great. Because trust me, especially after being at the college level, like coaches expect you to make mistakes because they happen no matter like whether you're a professional or you're playing for your high school team. Like they're going to happen, and it's more about how you respond and how you make the most of those opportunities to win the ball back, to be a defensive demon for your team or whatever the school's looking for, versus like mess up, throw your hands up, kind of let your body language get really bad, and that's a no bueno. So
yes, and I will tell you that we have a stat when we watch youth players called BLAT. This is our category, body language after turnover. And it's 0 through 5 scale. You do not want a 0 on your BLAT score.
no.
And that refers to like when you make a mistake, when you make a turnover, are you working hard, or do you just blame the ref, blame your teammates, walk, pout, roll on the ground? No, as Ava says, a 0 is no bueno. Be a good black person.
Yes.
Well, we love that. Great job.
Thank you.
We're going to buy your book when it comes out.
Okay, good. Expect New York Times bestseller list is what I'm aiming for. So
We
we'll
love
see.
it.
Thank you. Should go to you. Okay. Well, so we've gotten the player's perspective. Now time for a little bit of a different view. Rich, your turn to get some grilled questions. So, first off, what are college coaches even looking for?
Well, I'll tell you what is important to us at Northwestern. First of all, I think, you want to be the best you can be at soccer, at academics, and at being a good teammate. And those would give you the most options, right? Keep working on your game and keep working on the other parts of your life. We want people that are ambitious and competitive. We like to say we play attacking soccer. We attack with the ball, we attack without the ball, and we attack on all parts of the game. So people that want to be great, want to test themselves, and want to compete against the best are very important. That's number one. Number two is we want people that are team oriented. So being a good teammate, looking out for not only yourself, but the how the team is, how your teammates are doing, and being a good part of the community at the school. Number three, be good on the ball. We want people that can handle the rock. So passing, receiving, dribbling, shooting, aerial game, stuff like that, set pieces. We love good throw-ins too. We want good throw-ins. Number four, play both offense and defense regardless of your position. Everybody does, it's total soccer. Everybody needs to do both. And number five, we want people that are smart. We're at Northwestern and read the game well and like the game enough to try to get into it a bit. So that's us.
Yeah. Love it. Can confirm all those are true. So, Rich, assuming whoever's listening has zero background knowledge on the rules around the college recruiting process, what would you tell them are the most important ones?
Yeah, so let's see. Right now in Division 1, we have 28 roster spots. In Division 2 and Division 3, no limits, but having those roster spots in Division 1 kind of is a limiting factor, and we have to be careful with people we bring into the team. Timelines, we cannot respond to any email or call or text until after on June 15th or after your sophomore year. You can come as you did in 7th grade. You can come to an ID clinic, but we can't have you on campus other than an ID clinic or camp. Visits August 1st or after junior year. And I think those were really the basic ones.
Mm-hmm. Rich, if I were a player who was interested in Northwestern's program, what is the best way to reach out and connect with you?
I think with a lot of colleges, email is great, and make sure we know your name, what class you're graduating in, your club, your age group of your club, your specific team. Other personal information is great. And we love video. So sending a lot of video is important. I know a lot of people connect with us through social media, Instagram, X, and other things. So that's great as well. Those are probably the main ways. And I guess you could come to an ID clinic too.
How do you prefer players follow up after they adhere to your suggestions?
Well, following up is good. It's never a bad thing if you wrote a college and you didn't hear back. It's never bad that you didn't hear back. It's never bad to follow up and say, hey, it's just a reminder, it's me again. Just remember if it's before June 15th, between your sophomore and junior year, we can't reply anyway. But if we can and you're not hearing, it doesn't hurt to send a few follow-ups. Also, I would say don't find out who the assistant coaches are or maybe the recruiting coordinator and make sure they're copied on all emails. The head coaches are super busy. Not all of them see all the emails or have time to reply.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other final advice for up and coming players?
Well, I think the main thing is enjoy the journey. This is called the don't get bummed out theory.
Very scientific.
It's, there's a lot of ups and downs, as you said. Don't be afraid to hear a no. Don't be afraid to reach out and follow up. Everybody's journey is different, so don't compare yourself to your teammates or some other players that you know or an older sibling or anything like that. This is your journey. And finally, take ownership of your process. You're the one that makes the final decision. Have advisors. Maybe you have a board of directors that helps you with all your decisions, family members, people you admire at school, coaches, and things like that. But you take ownership of it because it's your life, your journey.
Boom. Yeah.
All right. We wish everybody luck. We just got back from Phoenix. We were watching
We
a
did.
lot of good teams. Ava was supporting her
Yes.
sister,
Yes.
Lucy. And I know there's a lot of tournaments coming up this spring and summer, and we're looking forward to getting out there and hearing from a lot of people. And we wish you best in your journey.
Yes. Good luck, guys. Also, Northwestern Cats ID clinics. I'm sure will be up and running in the summer. If
We'll be
anyone's
here in June and
interested.
July. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Cool. Good luck, guys. Thank
All right,
you.
Ciao.
Ciao.